Hey, another draft science video presentation. Mostly just comments on the Piro video because they do say an awful lot of shit. So it should be responded to. Because it's out there as some sort of truth and it's just not true and blah 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 blah. So this might take nearly forever, but anyway, let's go through some of this. So the JPG guy, who's playing some sort of diplomat, Henry Kissinger or something, just rephrasing what I'm saying and attempting to get some sort of response from the hecklers, and that's really all they've become. And it's, well, for what it's worth. He's basically saying momentum is energy, duh, just as Newton said it, just as, it just makes all the sense in the world that's why the word momentum exists, is because it had significance in some way, and the significance is that momentum represents how much capacity you have to disrupt something, to bang into it and cause it to move. That's what momentum is. Yes, it is defined as energy. And the reason why there was any confusion about this is just because of the historical record. You can look at it, And so if you look at the controversy, the arguments were kind of stupid and perceptual. Okay, I mean, you throw something light into gravity, it goes further. Doesn't mean it's going to land with more energy. Doesn't mean it has more energy because it fell further. It's lighter. That's how gravity works. It only applies force based on how much mass you have. So if you don't have much mass, it doesn't apply much force, and therefore you don't have much energy. I mean, the arguments were, that juvenile. And you could understand maybe making those kind of perceptual mistakes in the 1600s. But it's not the 1600s anymore, so really that shouldn't be a problem. But they've made it a problem. Again, the history is so bad. There was absolutely no reason to invent this MV squared crud. The only reason why Leibniz did it is because he hated Newton, and he hated Newton's physics, and he hated being accused of being a crook, which he was, anyway. And that the entire concept of kinetic energy is unneeded and redundant. It's not even that it's redundant, it's just so frickin' wrong and stupid. It started off as mv squared. It didn't even have the half in front of it. So we know it started off being way the hell off, way exaggerating what energies things had. And it's still 100% wrong in the sense that you're doubling the amount of energy for no good reason. Okay, he says no one can prove otherwise. No one can even give me a glimmer of reason to believe there's any good evidence supporting it. All they have is 200-year-old clay experiments, 250-year-old clay experiments. And I've already pointed out, well, it can be understood that clay has a huge bias for velocity. The faster you go, the less you disrupt the clay. I can prove the same thing's true with a phone book. A piece of paper. I can prove that certain things break in a certain way, and by breaking, to velocity, by yielding to velocity, they use less energy to fall apart. So if you can go into some things with velocity, you can get further into them. And the same is true, as I pointed showing the video, that you can mix up some cornstarch and you'll get exactly the opposite effect. That if you go through it fast, you don't get anywhere at all, and if you go through it really slow, then you go through it as far as you want. So the fact that you have to do these experiments with a little bit of care and a little bit of caution, you have to use a little bit of reasoning. I mean, okay, yeah, that's science. Sorry that science is too big a burden for you people. All right, anyway. And that all the experiments he has shown, all the experiments I have seen, okay? I mean, I'm not lying. There isn't some experiment where, oh yeah, I saw that really it's twice as much energy somewhere. No, I've seen zero evidence of them ever collecting mv squared. Ever showing me how the mv squared number actually contains these megajoules. That the dime flying out of one side of the spaceship going 1,000 miles an hour has actually more capacity to disrupt the universe, 2,000 times more capacity, okay, not just twice anymore, but 2,000 times more capacity to disrupt the universe than the 2-liter bottle going 1 mile an hour. I've seen absolutely no experimental evidence. It's a 2,000 to 1 difference in energy. That one should be showable somewhere. Somehow you should be able to show me the bullet knocking over more, funny Christmas statues or something. You should have some evidence demonstrating this 2,000 times more energy reality, if it was real. But clearly it's not real. Anyway, have been flawed because gravity can fool certain aspects of the test. Well, I'm not even saying that, so I don't know what you're saying. He's been shown. I haven't been shown any. Sorry. I mean, okay, Stephen Bro did some experiments that are just grotesquely flawed and almost too disgusting to even watch. I mean, he's got 3 different videos playing in the same frame. I mean, he's got his, he's got them in transparencies. You can't even see the fucking experiments. Yeah, I'd say that's all just a waste of time. It's done so badly. But beyond that, where is the evidence? Oh, that's right, it doesn't exist. Because gravity can fool certain aspects of the test. I'm just saying gravity is a fact. It's a fact that lighter things go further in gravity. Does that mean lighter things have more energy? I mean, is your logic that poor that I have to even have an argument based on this argument that people actually think because it goes further in gravity it has more energy, total energy is higher? Okay. But this basic claim is that momentum and energy is the same thing. The basic claim is that it never changed, that Newton was right, and there's absolutely no reason to sit there and screw with this. No good reason. So Dave says, in the experiment video, the spring at a given length stores a certain amount of energy. If you double the mass, the velocity will not be 1/2. Okay, so I've played Julian Sumner. Physics is my business. Okay, saying that it will always be, okay, if you double the mass, if you halve the mass, you double the velocity, and vice versa. Okay, we got physics girls saying it, and we got Lewin saying it. That's not, and to them, they don't have to counter-argue any of those physicists. Now, there's no video they've shown me where any physicist says, oh no, it's not half. It's 1.4. None. No example. Okay. It will be squared energy times 2 divided by mass. Well, whatever that is, frankly. The experiment is performed routinely. So where? Where is it performed routinely? It's just a joke to say this nonsense. There's no experiment performed routinely. Where is it? Routine experiments are shown on the, there's video of them on YouTube all over the place, the routine experiments, like the double slit and things like that. They're routinely on the internet. You can go see them. Where is this experiment, this routine experiment? Okay, it would be an instant Nobel Prize for anyone that could prove velocity does not scale according to the kinetic energy. So again, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's clear that physics girls said, no, you conserve the momentum. Lewin said, no, you conserve the momentum. And Sumner said, you conserve the momentum. So what are you talking about? I just don't understand. How do those physicists keep their jobs if they're so wrong? And why hasn't anybody pointed it out? I mean, nobody's going to point out that they're wrong? I just can't, it's just like you are just arguing with lunatic trolls. I mean, these people are the fringe. They think they're arguing real physics when they're not even close to it. Okay, I mean conventional physics. Piro thinks he's arguing conventional physics, yet he hasn't watched any of these videos. He hasn't watched the physics girl video. He doesn't know what they really say. Alright, since it is used throughout physics and beyond. Yeah, whatever. What is that? And beyond. So again, there's no example you're giving of how it is in any way enhances physics. So I still haven't been provided one single example where if I follow the momentum I get the wrong answer. So they still haven't provided where Newton was wrong. So they never even provide the example where Newton made the mistake and therefore Leibniz was right. So they aren't highlighting it and saying, look at this perfect example that Leibniz provided. Because he didn't provide a perfect example. He argued from his metaphysics. He argued from his God theory. He didn't argue physics. That's why he died a nobody, is because the physicists, frankly, weren't very impressed. All right, and then the French dug this up, 30 years later, and with their clay experiments. Anyway, Gary could greatly improve his situation in the world by performing this experiment and taking his place among the greatest minds. Well, what's turning out to be true is that a lot of these minds aren't so great. That there hasn't been a great mind in 300 years, frankly, because this is so bad and so obvious. Just like there are two slit lies, when they talk about the double slit and the photon splits in two, and then when they go to explain the single slit, they have to come up with some contrived reason that the photon splits in two again. I mean, it's just such obvious chicanery. All right. So what is stopping him from doing this? So again, the whole this argument over and over again that everybody should do amateur experiments and that's good science. Just do it sloppy and shitty like Bro did it, okay? Because that's really good science. No, that's really shitty science. That's how you start drawing all these wrong conclusions, is doing shitty science. Okay, because he knows he is full of shit. So again, these are just lie after lie after lie. So I know I'm full of shit, even though I haven't provided one single piece of good evidence indicating a motherfucking thing. That any way I'm wrong. Right? So some guy later is going to post a whole bunch of links to a video that's so stupid in that it proves me right again. Go figure. And they think that's evidence against me. I mean, these people are so stupid. Okay, and that his inability to comprehend high school physics. So again, comprehending what? High school experiments. Well, let's go see some. So let's go again. Show me the experiment. I can show you the car moving, okay? They double its mass by just dropping a mass on it, and it moves half the velocity. So those high school experiments perfectly validate that momentum works. They don't in any way show that this idiotic notion that somehow the cart lost half its energy is at all true, because they don't crash the cart into something else to prove that it lost half its energy. They don't show you how the cart lost half its energy, because the fact is it didn't lose any energy, because you didn't turn any of it into heat, and you didn't turn it into a bunch of other things. So therefore the energy's still there, because the only time you turn the energy in into something unusable is when you turn it into heat. Heat is hard to put back in a direction. That's the problem with heat. Heat goes in all directions, therefore you lose it. All right. Disqualifies him from stopping him from doing this because he knows he is full of shit. So again, obviously I have no reason to believe I'm full of shit. They just make this statement as if it has some kind of credulity, some sort of meaning. It can't possibly have any meaning to a fair-minded person. I changed my mind because they provided zero evidence. Oh no, that can't happen. And that is his inability to comprehend high school physics disqualifies him from determining the fate of anyone on this planet based on his self-proclaimed powers of superior reasoning. The fact that I have superior reasoning skills is made obvious by the fact that you can't make a counter argument without talking about how much my feet smell or something. Something so unrelated to the subject and impossible to make any kind of correlation that could in any way be relevant. Okay, so the fact that you can't stay on the subject is a clear indication that you have no argument. Oh, anyway. So Dave is obviously just Farley, but anyway. So Jerry joins in. He knows he's wrong. So where do you get that, Jerry Liar? I mean, do you know, Jerry Liar, that's just a lie, Jerry Liar? You just change your name to Jerry Liar because all you do is keep lying, okay? You're just a stinking little trolly liar. And that's going to be written on your tombstone. So, live with that. I can see the pain in his face every time someone challenges his ideas. I mean, what a joke. The pain is the fact that, wow, you're really this dumb. Again, it's a real problem living on a planet full of dumbasses, It's a little bit depressing and discouraging. So yeah, every dumb thing you say is just another nail in the human race's coffin of stupidity and waste. This is why humans fail so dismally, is because obviously you people are really, really fucking stupid. And that's really, really depressing. All right. It's like his brain was an anthill and you poked a stick in it, so millions of thoughts have run around there and filled a hole with shit again. So this is just a brilliant physics argument, isn't it? I mean, it's just so wow, you really nailed it there. I mean, I can't get over the precision of it. I don't hate him. Well, I clearly couldn't give a fuck what happened to you, frankly. So I put you in the hateable category. You're a despicable lying sack of smelly shit, okay? And I would like you to get what you deserve. I just like problem solving. By lying, that's your way to solve problems. To be a lying piece of scum. You've provided zero evidence that I'm wrong. Zero. Zero, zero, zero. Not a single experimental piece of evidence, not anything at all. Nothing to validate your notion that there is anything called mv squared, 1/2 mv squared, and that somehow you collected it somewhere. There's not a single example anywhere on this planet of you collecting this extra energy. Again, where did you make the dime going 1,000 miles an hour? Where did you collect the 2,000 times more energy? Oh, that's right, you didn't. Ever. Okay. Let's see, Dave. Hopefully he'll watch the video and give his thoughts. I don't know what video he's referencing, but his claims is that the foundational understanding of modern physics is flawed. My accusation is that human beings are fundamentally flawed, and unfortunately, scientists are disguised. They're playing the role of human being, which means they just turn into scum, and they lose all credibility in terms of making an argument relevant to the subject. Maybe just explain in layman terms where you feel he's getting it wrong. La 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 la. Jerry could don't chance Dave. Well, Dave can't do that. I don't think he knows it. So this is Jerry answering Richie instead of Dave. Okay. Now this is Jerry talking to Jerry. Okay. JPG talking to Jerry Hall. I don't think he knows it. Okay, so Jerry said he knows he's wrong. Oh yeah, so at least the JPG guy is saying, yeah, well that sounds like he just made that shit up because I don't see any evidence that he knows he's wrong. Why the fuck would he be making all these videos and completely double downing and offering all this money if he knew he was wrong? That wouldn't be a very smart thing to do. Okay, he's open to watching experiments, but none of them have swayed him. I mean, none of them have even been on, some of them haven't even been on the subject. I mean, measuring a spring constant is hardly on the subject. And like I said, the other video is just so stupid that they link to. I mean, it's just so stupid. But none of them have swayed him into believing kinetic energy is real. Perhaps you could explain to him in layman terms why momentum isn't energy. He can't explain how it's not energy because then it doesn't have any meaning. I mean, momentum can't mean anything if it's not some kind of description of energy. Why would it be relevant if it's not energy? If he doesn't back, so Dave says, if he doesn't back his theory to the tune of a few $100 for the chance to be the greatest scientist since Newton. So he's saying, again, where I've plainly stated I'll finance the experiment. Now, I've made the offer. Now, frankly, there are people watching this video who do probably have the hardware to do the experiment, and they don't want the money for some reason. So, I'll have to be more aggressive in soliciting it. I offered, okay, the, what's the guy's channel called? Shit, not gonna remember. I mean, he's got like 1 million subscribers, and he does these really, he made an electron microscope. Okay, I mean, the guy's really does technical stuff. And I offered him $2,000. So I mean, what are you gonna do? Just okay. Then what does that say about his theory? So again, there's no doubt about the theory. So I just now maybe I have to offer the universities the money. But the fact is that yes, let's do it clinically. Let's make sure we agree on what proof is going to look like, because that's part of the problem here, right? Not all of you think it's hard to push light things. and that they can only go 1.4 times as fast. So some of you have some other catch that you'd wish to escape the truth using. So I mean, what will convince you? I mean, I've already shown pretty hard evidence that you can't get around the momentum thing, okay? That there is no 1.4 nonsense happening. That, you know, if you have the mass, you double the velocity. Now, these people don't believe that, but still, even if I prove that, they might still come up with some other catch. So it won't matter to them. All right. So Dave posted this stupid link. Okay, so let's just go to it to show that it's stupid. I think this is the stupid guy just measuring this. Oh no, this is the woman. So let's play this. So this link is posted like 17 times on Piro's video, and it proves nothing. I mean, there's first no experiment actually performed. Okay, so two blocks are connected together by an ideal spring and free to slide on frictionless surfaces. The blocks are pulled apart so the spring is stretched. Right, so this is the one I just showed with the wooden blocks. Alright, so you have a mass 2 on one side and a mass 1 on the other side. So there are different masses on the two sides. The basic conclusion of this video is that yes, momentum is always conserved. So the momentum will always be it starts 0 and it finishes 0 is the way they say it. But obviously there's no change in the final momentum in this system. So the two objects will end up with the same momentum, which means the velocity will be doubled, blah, 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 or depending on the thing. And she's clearly pointing out how I'm not putting any limit on that. So it means that M2 can be the Empire State Building, and it works still. The idea still holds. The Empire State Building will absorb 1/2 of the momentum in its direction, and the other object will still just get its half. And so it completely validates exactly what I said. And they're using this as an argument against me. So you do see how stupid.
Let us consider two blocks that are connected by an ideal spring as shown in the diagram and are free to slide on a horizontal frictionless surface.
This video is so unimpressive in so many ways because it just talks around the subject, but I'll point out the talking around the subject.
The blocks are pulled apart so that the spring is stretched and then released from rest. So we want to determine the ratio of the velocity of block 1 to that of block 2, in other words V1 over V2, as the separation of the blocks decreases. We take as our system the two blocks and the spring. After we have released the blocks, there is no net external force acting on the system.
I mean, it's almost stupid to say there's no net external force. Of course, there's no net external force, but you already said it was frictionless and this and that. So we already know that. So again, these are the little things they say that just really don't mean anything. There's clearly an internal force. As soon as you release the blocks, the internal force is going to be the spring. Is going to go back to its original condition.
We can therefore apply the principle of conservation of momentum to the system. The initial momentum of the blocks before they were released is 0. Therefore, the final momentum is equal to m1 v1 plus m2 v2, which is equal to 0.
Which clearly doesn't equal 0. It means that one object's moving in one direction, the other object's moving in the other direction, and the movement is canceled by the difference in the velocities and the size of the masses, so that it's the same energy moving in both directions. There is not 0 energy in the system, there's just 0 net energy to the external world.
Therefore m1 v1 is just equal to minus m2 v2, and therefore the ratio of v1 over v2 is equal to minus.
Right, so it's an inversion. The velocities and the masses are inverted, okay, is the idea. And so you're just saying whatever the ratio of the velocity 1 to 2, it's exactly the same as the masses of 2 to 1. So they're opposite. 1, 2, 1 in the denominator, 2 in the numerator, and then vice versa. And the masses are just reciprocally different. So there's a proportion and it's always going to be the same. So if you increase the mass, you decrease the velocity. If you decrease the mass, you increase the velocity. So it's a perfect relationship. So no matter what happens, no matter how much M2 I create, I'm always going to get the same amount of energy in the system.
M2 over M1. The minus sign indicates that the two velocities have opposite directions. Now let us look at the ratio of kinetic energies.
Right, so now so she's basically just saying that this one always comes out to zero. So it's always going to be whatever you do to the mass, you change the velocity. Whatever you do to this mass, you change the velocity. And those two things will always cancel out. They'll always be the same amount of energy going one way as going the other way, so the momentum is completely conserved. Blah, 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 blah. Completely consistent with what I say.
To the blocks as their separation decreases. K1 over K2 is just equal to a half M1 V1 squared over a half M2 V2 squared, which is equal to M1 over M2 times V1 over V2 all squared.
So now you can see they aren't reciprocal. M1 is in the top of the fraction, V1 is in the top of the fraction. So they're not inverted now. So now they won't equal to zero. Now they won't equal out. And the bottom line is going to be, if you change the mass, you will change the velocities.
Which is equal to M1 over M2 minus M2 over M1 all squared, which is just equal to M2 over M1.
So here you go, M2 over M1, which means that basically you're going to end up with twice the mass, so the answer is going to be 2, right? So if you have twice the mass in you have one mass in M1, you have two masses in M2, then obviously your answer is going to be 2. That's going to be your difference in their kinetic energies. One of them's going to have twice as much energy as the other. Now obviously I don't think that energy actually exists, but that's consistent with what they say. So clearly they're trying to conserve both things, which you can't conserve, and so clearly there's no conservation of energy because you got a 2 now. So they don't equal. They don't equal 0.
What can we say about the motion of the center of mass? So
this is part of the critical thing, is the center of mass of the spring, because what everybody's thinking is happening is somehow you could change how much energy is on one side to the other side. Like somehow I can give M1 more energy by having a heavier M2. And I can't, because I can't change the center of the mass of the spring. I can't force the energy upstream against the pressure pushing. So if I can't do that, I can't migrate pressure from one side onto the other side, because it has to go against the pressure of the other spring to do that. I can't add pressure into pressure. So the two sides can't really communicate with each other. They can't send extra, oh, I have extra energy because I'm not going anywhere, I'll send it to you. It can't send it because it has to go against equal amount of pressure to do it. So it doesn't go there. It can't go there.
Resultant external force is equal to 0. It follows that F external is equal to m times the acceleration of the center of mass, which is equal to 0. And therefore the acceleration of the center of mass is 0.
Right, so if you can't move the center of mass, you can't change the energy. It's kind of that simple. The only way you can make less energy happen for one of these objects is you have to move that center of mass one way or the other, okay, to evade the energy, to force the producer of the energy. You got to make the thing that's producing the energy, you got to make that thing move away from you for you to get hit by less energy. And because that can't move, you're stuck. You're stuck with dealing with the energy.
And therefore the velocity of the center of mass is constant. But the initial velocity of the center of mass is equal to 0, and therefore the center of mass remains in the same position throughout.
There you go, that was it. So that's the video that was supposed to be convincing evidence that I'm wrong, and there isn't anything in it that shows I'm wrong. The only thing I would state is there's no such thing as that extra energy. It's magical, frankly. She didn't account for where it came from. All of a sudden I made more energy in the system. Right, because I made the blocks lighter and lighter, I make more energy? That doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all. I put lighter and lighter blocks on the spring and I just make extra free energy. That's pretty stupid, actually. It's incredibly stupid. Okay. So anyway, so somebody else posts this link over and over and over again on this video. That link to nothing. Okay. Certainly not an experiment. Certainly not a piece of evidence where you say, oh yeah, I can't refute that. Alright, so Jerry says, no, I'm not going to bother. I have some ideas that are interesting because I haven't heard anyone describe it that way. I don't even know what that means. Jerry has some ideas. I know. Kinetic energy is not like a bucket of energy that you carry around. So what is it then? Obviously the objects carry it. So, I mean, I don't know how you can actually think any other way. You really think a bullet isn't carrying the energy? You know, it just shows up, the bullet requests it when it hits your head, it requests energy. Could I please have some energy? I'm going to do some work now. It is about your mass and velocity relative to other objects. So this is obviously just absolute mush. That somehow, depending on what you hit, you have a different amount of energy. Oh, that's probably going to be way too silly. Alright, B can move away from A, which is standing still, but it might as well be the other way. Yeah, so now he's still playing relativity games like it matters. We know that either your head moves into the bullet at 1,000 miles an hour, or the bullet moves into your head at 1,000 miles an hour. You choose. Does it make any difference? No. We know the opposite direction thing is happening. One of these two objects are going to move into each other, and there's going to be a certain velocity. And it doesn't really matter which way you want to look at it. Now, obviously, realistically, we can sort of understand the whole universe isn't likely moving your head 2,000 miles an hour and the bullet standing still. We know the whole universe isn't contrived just to do that, so it's likely that the energy is in the bullet. Okay, A moves from B. It doesn't matter. Nature doesn't care if I give B a push or I did nothing to A. So again, so this cleans up nothing. This relativity argument is so frickin' irrelevant. It has nothing to do with the fact that there's two conflicting vectors of momentum. And the fact that we are perceptually limited, that is, we don't have a control to look at to know exactly who's doing the moving, doesn't mean we think the energy doesn't exist in one or the other object. One of them is actually moving, and that's just a fact, or they're both moving. And it just doesn't matter which one's doing it. Again, it doesn't matter whether I shove your head at 2,000 miles an hour into a bullet or I shove a bullet at 2,000 miles an hour into your head. They are both moving depending on which one you choose as a reference frame. So again, who cares? Irrelevant. Even if I did nothing to A, it has kinetic energy as long as the velocities are different. So I don't even know what that means. Even if I did nothing to A, I don't know, what does that even mean? It could be standing on B and tie a rubber band to A, or do the opposite. Then watch it getting stretched and do work. It's just the idea that perhaps flimsy, but I'll try to expand my way of thinking. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so he says he's going to make videos, but I don't think he's going to, because they're going to be easy to rip an ass to. Anyway, an important difference between kinetic energy and momentum, there we go, that's what we're after, is that one is a scale. Oh, so we're just playing this scalar vector bullshit. No, it's already stated. As soon as somebody says kinetic energy formula, they've already established this way is negative, this way is positive. It's a default. It happens right away. So as soon as they're going to do the equation, they turn it into a vector. So don't keep lying that somehow these are different equations, because they're not. It's just a lie. So you're just overtly lying. If I look at MV, it doesn't tell me which direction anything's going in. I have to assume. Just too silly. So these are just such lame excuses. So that's the difference between momentum and kinetic energy. I could write the formulas and somehow you're just going to declare one a scalar and one a vector, even though there's no vectors or there's no lines over anything. There's no references. When somebody writes MV, they don't have a line over it, so they're not even technically playing your game. They're not even doing it just to show you that oh look, it's a scalar, it's a vector. I mean, There's no vector. So again, just more horseshit, more lying. All right, that changes everything. It changes nothing. It's such a trivial pile of irrelevancy. So as soon as they go to do the equation and they say left is negative and right is positive, they've already turned the 1/2 mv squared into a vector. Scalars can't cancel each other out like vectors. Well, of course they can, and they do right in the equation. We just saw her do the minuses all through the equation. How did she do that? How did she know which way was minus? Oh, that's right, because she established that this way was plus and this way was minus. That's how. If I drop a bag of sand on top of a train, it doesn't affect its forward motion. Oh, this is funny, okay, because the vectors are perpendicular. Right, so it doesn't affect its momentum. That's exactly what the experiments show. But you say it lost half its energy. Okay. It could give a little more speed by throwing the bag backwards, just like I could do to a boat. Yes, so what? That's not the experiment being described. You're not talking about I'm going to put something with momentum onto the train that has an opposite momentum. The simple example is I'm going to try to minimize the doubling of the train's weight. I'm going to try to make it as frictionless and as impositional, make it as least impositional as possible. And we just know that this is what the outcome's going to be, is half the speed. I mean, you could do this in space all day long, where you just, attach something to your movement, your motion through space. I can move you through space, and I can force you to drag some extra weight, and that dragging of the extra weight will steal your momentum, in the sense it won't steal your momentum, it'll clearly steal your velocity, because you're just going to give it to the other object. But collectively, you'll have the same momentum. Not 1.4 times the momentum. Oh, anyway, they're just such liars. Oh. Alright, this is obviously Farley the Troll doing something pretty disgusting, but whatever. So they're just trying to make the people who don't agree with Piro, trying to just make that group look bad by creating another fake person. So this is one of the white people in blackface, burning down cars. This is just more of this. I'm going to try to fake the tragedy, fake news. So just fake news makers who probably complain about fake news. It's just so ironic, and they make fake news. So anyway, this is the one with 4 million comments. So the Piro's answer, I've already played that complete useless crap. Alright, so the same as Burton guy, he hung in there pretty good, so I'll read his comments, and then he just gave up after a while. You don't seem to be acknowledging that the formula states, this could be Farley too, just trying to screw up anything called human interaction, by being a fake. Okay, you don't seem to be acknowledging that the formula states that the lighter, faster object will have more energy than heavier, slower objects. Go to any kinetic energy calculator online, you'll see it demonstrate. You enter 10 pounds, mass of 5 meters, you get 11 joules, but if you enter 5 pounds, 10 meters, you get 22. Right, two objects that obviously have the same momentum, how can they have different energies? How can objects with the same momentum have different energies? It makes no sense at all. Okay, why is this momentum conserved, but the lighter, faster object has double the energy? And then he says some more. I mean, is there a way to explain what I posted in a clear manner so that I can finally end this subject? Alright, so Jerry chimes in. Newton didn't get the wrong answer. Okay, so let's understand. I'll play. There's a physics girl video, I think, where, she actually says it kind of clearly. Yeah, it's probably this one. Alright.
Equation that's closer to what Newton originally wrote for second law, you would actually write F equals P. So if you want over delta T,
so we'll
force equals the rate of change of the mass times the velocity, and mv equals P. So if you want an equation that's closer to what Newton originally wrote for...
Okay, so let's understand F equals ma is not Newton's equation. That's our perversion of Newton's equation. So let's understand, that's part of the game here, is to change the facts.
Second law, you would actually write F equals change in momentum over change in time.
Obviously, Newton believed in momentum. So obviously this is what Newton wrote. Okay, and all he's simply saying is that, yes, you're either changing the mass or you're changing the velocity, and that is going to be, that's a force. So anytime your mass or your velocity changes, it had to be a force that did it. It doesn't change for no reason. It changes because a force acted on you, and you can know the force based on how much change it made in your momentum. So that's Newton. All right, Newton isn't 1/2 mv squared. This is Newton. So that's just a context, because these people do constantly lie, okay, about what Newton did or said. They just make up this, just as they've made Einstein into somebody who believed in gravitational waves and believed that entanglement was real. All right, Newton didn't get the wrong answer. So it's just such a stupid thing to say, right? Why do we have mv squared? If Newton wasn't getting wrong answers, why do you change the energy formula? Why? For what purpose? What's the function of it? What is the reason for mv squared to exist if it isn't because something's broken? If it's not fixing something, why does it exist? I mean, this is just such nonsense. He said that momentum is conserved, and it is. Well, you don't believe that it is. Okay, so all these people are saying that you're not conserving the momentum, that you can only make the fast thing can only go 1.4 times faster. You can't get the energy into the fast thing somehow. That's what they're saying overtly, okay? So, I mean, why are you arguing with me? Why don't you argue with the people in this comment section who say things overtly different? Why don't you argue with them? I mean, you're just such a hypocrite, a dishonest, duplicitous pile of shit. Okay, it's Gary who claims that momentum and energy can be transferred into heat. Well, I'm saying quite obviously that's where it always goes. That's where it always tends to die. So what do you think? All right, so let's understand that if I move the atmosphere, that's the same thing as heat, you could argue, right? So we know the kinetic balls, if you do the Newton ball thing, it's all runs out of energy. Well, why? Because the momentum is used up. What is it used up doing? Heating the atmosphere and heating the balls. So heat is where you're losing the energy. That's the stuff going the wrong way. The stuff you can't make go back into the energy of going back and forth anymore. So you've taken energy going in directions, and you've lost it in directions that aren't the direction you need the balls to move. You're moving things that aren't the ball. You're moving atoms in the atmosphere. All right. So, of course, heat is critical to understanding how energy is lost in a circumstance. And I already did this bowling pin analogy, right? If I just line up the pins, I can make the energy stay in the system a very, very long time. I can knock down thousands and thousands of pins with a small amount of energy, because I'm not losing much to the environment if I keep forcing pin to hit pin to hit pin. All right, Newton never said that. Newton never said that, but Gary is using his name to support his ideas. Newton didn't know it yet, and I said it quite clearly. So this is, again, just another lie. I said quite clear it wasn't until the 1800s that they put the heat connection in, that they realized that you have to account for heat out of the energy in the system. You can't make heat without energy. And the energy is the momentum, and that's what you have to use up to make the heat. And so you can't do it backwards. You can't take your momentum, convert it into heat, and then transfer it to another object. So if I'm a train, I can't make heat and then give the other train my momentum. If I'm a cue ball and I'm going to hit the 8 ball, I can't hit something else first and make heat and then convey my energy, because I'm not going to have my energy anymore because I lost it to the heat. So your momentum is used up whenever you're making heat. You're not keeping your momentum. That's what I've clearly stated, you liar. All right, he would uh, relate in his, he would rotate in his grave if he knew what a hippie in New Jersey, so again, all kinds of irrelevancy, is doing to him. Who are you? Why don't you take a video? Why don't we show who you are so we can look at you and mock how you look? Okay, because that's what's really important, is how big your fucking nose is. So let's see how big your fucking nose is, weasel. Hider, little trolley hider, right? Who is this jackass? You know, who thinks he's above everybody else and can make these critiques of their personal lifestyle or all this other. Oh, he doesn't have any. He doesn't show himself, this coward. Ugh, pathetic. Ugh. Anyway, all right, continuing. Why are you using a new account, right? Apparently you made a new account since I blocked you. I'm not sure, but yeah, that didn't look like your old account. Anyway, so Piro says, dude. So this, Piro's like 55 years old. Anyway, to make that, so I'm just saying, all these people who think dude isn't a pejorative, just understand, what do you think Piro's using it as right here? I'm so much better and superior to you. I'll call you a dude. It's like me calling you a boy. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty silly. Anyway, to make that smaller object travel twice the velocity requires twice as much energy. So again, Piro completely denies the physical facts, I would argue. That's annoying. Right, should be back. Okay, so this just really gets to the core of it, right? Because how many of these people believe what Piro's writing here? To make the smaller object travel twice the velocity requires twice as much energy. So in the case of the bullet, or the dime, it takes 2,000 times as much energy to make the dime go 1,000 miles an hour as it takes to make the 2 kilograms go 1 mile an hour. It takes 2,000 times as much energy to make those two things happen, which is kind of just a denial of all the mechanics. I mean, frankly, a denial of what recoil in a gun is. The recoil of the gun is you getting the opposite reaction. So he obviously doesn't believe in Newton's third law. That's clear. Because that can't make any sense. And he doesn't understand the simple, like I already drew it all the way down, right? You can go from the math for, going from the 2 kilograms down to the, 0.0002 kilograms and show how the energy works out just fine, the momentum. The same joules of energy to create both effects. And it's just a fact. That's how much energy it takes. It takes the 3 joules to do these two events. 2 joules. But anyway, so, I mean, do all of these dissenters believe this kind of crap? That Piro wrote here? I mean, to make a smaller object travel twice the velocity requires twice as much energy. So Lewin doesn't believe that, and Physics Girl doesn't believe that, and Professor Julian Sumner doesn't believe that. That's what the formula says. So again, he just keeps saying what the formula says, not what any evidence says. So, and the formula really doesn't say that, frankly. The formula doesn't oblige you to account for where the energy comes from. And the experiments are supposed to make you understand that. Okay. If you push a M2 mass and it goes velocity 1, then pushing a M1 mass with the same energy makes the M1 mass go 1.4, not 2 times the velocity. So in spite of what Lewin says, in spite of what Physics Girl says, in spite of what Julian Sumner say is an absolute truth, and in spite of the experiment I showed where it actually happens, he just keeps saying it. He doesn't have any evidence for it, but he keeps saying it. So where do you go in a conversation when you can't start with any kind of reasoning connected to a fact? And Piro won't watch any of the experimental videos, and so he won't have to explain any of them. The lighter mass will not be going twice as fast. So let's play the Physics Girl video. Just to point out, well, she doesn't know that. So here's where she's finishing the the train. Okay, so a train collides with another train, sticks them together. Now it weighs twice as much and it's going half as fast. She fully concedes that's the reality.
The initial velocity, which makes sense because we said the two cars have equal masses and we only had one of the masses moving at the start. So now you've got double the moving mass at the end. So they must be going half of the original speed if momentum is conserved.
Okay, and when she says if momentum is conserved, she doesn't mean she doubts that it is. She already overtly stated it always is, and it's kinetic energy that's not conserved. So that's clearly her understanding.
That's our basic inelastic collision problem solved using conservation of momentum. But what about conservation of energy? Is kinetic energy conserved in our system here? Surprisingly, no. Let's see why by...
Right, so it means that, and the fact is you came up with more of it, so you have to explain where you got the free energy from, frankly. Well, no, you come up with less. Okay, so they're doing the going from light thing to heavy thing, so they can just say, oh yeah, we lost it all as heat. So that's what she's basically going to say. So let's jump through
working
that
out
part.
the math. Let's calculate the energies before and after the collision. Kinetic energy initial
All right, so we'll jump
is just going to be one
to
and
here.
measure it. So when you have a collision where things stick together afterwards, you can't use conservation of energy to solve those problems. And that's where the word inelastic comes from. The objects that collide deform and they don't elastically return to their original state. So done with inelastic.
Right.
In an inelastic collision,
finished.
when the colliding objects stick, some of the original kinetic energy is lost. Some of it escapes as heat. Oftentimes it goes into
Okay,
the
I don't know how well, anyway, here's where she finishes.
44 joules. After the collision, so our final kinetic energy equals 1/2.
So the light car, before it hits, has 144 joules, and then the heavy car going half as fast only has 70 whatever, too.
V squared. But my final mass is both masses together, which equals 4 kilograms. So this equals 1/2 times 4 kilograms. And then my final velocity squared, so my 6 meters per second squared. And that equals 72 joules. So we lost kinetic energy. So what happened to the energy?
All right, so understand, you lost half the energy. It's not a little bit of energy, especially if you had real train cars. It would be insane amounts of energy. And there's no explanation of where the energy is lost. And again, I can show you the experiment done where they just drop a weight and they don't lose any energy. There's no energy loss.
Well, in an inelastic collision, when the colliding objects stick, some of the original kinetic energy is lost. Some of it escapes as heat. Oftentimes it goes into the object's mechanical deformation. Like if you...
So that's what she said happened. Half the energy was lost to a lot of things being deformed and broken and heated and all this stuff that didn't happen because you got the same amount of momentum out. So the simple argument is, is it possible to do all this heating and keep the train moving? That is, make the apple go the same, with the same momentum. So here I went in, I deformed it, I lost half the energy, but the apple goes away with the same momentum. Is that possible? Half the velocity, twice the mass, let's say. Is that possible? It's not possible. I can't put the momentum into the second train. It can't be going 6 miles an hour in her example. If I did all this stuff with the energy. If I did this stuff, my momentum has to be less. I can't give my momentum because I lost it. I already went the wrong way with it. It went directions that I can't control anymore. How can I possibly pour it into there? So it's as simple as me arguing, I'm going to pour all my paint, my momentum paint, into the other object, and I'm going to spill half of it. I can't do both of those things. I can't spill the energy and pour it into the train. It's just not possible, and it's just so obviously not possible. And how can people argue for this impossible physics? I mean, this is absolute bullshit. Just terrible. All right, well, I'll be back in a second. Or maybe longer. All right, I'm back. So, Pirro overtly says the lighter mass will not be going twice as fast. So that basically just breaks Newton's third law. So if I made a gun, just a tube, and I put a heavy bullet, twice as heavy on one side, and a lighter bullet on the other side, half as much, and I have a charge, same charge, he's saying the lighter bullet can't go twice as fast. So the equal and opposite reaction will not be the same. There'll be more momentum going out one side than the other side, somehow. So there won't be any equal and opposite reaction thing. Now, obviously, I've explained there's no equal and opposite reaction. There's opposite reactions because the explosion goes both ways. But, so he's overtly making a statement as if this is a fact. There's clearly no evidence of this fact. There's no spring experiment. There's no lever even. He's saying if I have a lever and I turn the lever, okay, lever long this way, short this way, pivot point, right? So it's, longer this way. So this goes twice as fast as this in terms of the lever moving. And I turn the lever. He's saying that the fast object can only go 1.4 times as fast as the half mark. So even though the lever's moving at half the velocity, and this is moving at twice the velocity, somehow the object isn't. Now, that might be true depending on how much energy you put into a lever. I mean, obviously levers have to bend. They have to accommodate the mass they're pushing. So all of that has to be into the, you have to have enough motion for you to actually get the object going. For it to make steady contact and actually acquire the velocity. That's where Stephen Bro's experiment kind of failed, as the lever didn't move very far. But anyway, it's a whole nother argument. I mean, he's clearly saying that somehow there's something actually preventing it. So even though the lever moved at twice the velocity, somehow the object slows down. So even though it's going the same speed as the lever, so it's going, say, a velocity of 2, somehow it leaves and it just goes 1.4. Does it make any sense? Same spring compression, two different objects. He's saying the lighter object can't go. I can't make it go twice as fast as the heavy object, the twice as heavy object. I mean, how can he say this stuff? I mean, it's almost an extraordinary claim, and we have no evidence. Not even ordinary evidence. We have no evidence of that being true. All right. So he's just, the lighter mass will not be going twice as fast. He's saying it overtly, that there is no equal and opposite reaction. That's why that's what Gary wrongly thinks, and it's easy to test in experiments. So he keeps saying it's easy to test in experiments, and yet they don't have any experiments. Not a single fucking experiment. You're saying, how, if it's so easy, why haven't you done it yet? You've had hundreds of years and millions of scientists, and you haven't done it, and yet you're expecting me to prove it. Oh, I mean, that's so funny. They do it, this experiment, in high schools. Where? Where's one example of them doing the experiment in a high school? Where? One example. He can't provide one example. So, and he's so arrogant. I mean, he's saying all this as emphatic proof, and yet he has nothing. You see, in your case, the lighter object would be twice the energy because it was thrown with twice the energy. So, so he's saying in the case of the train, the lighter train, it took twice as much energy to actually push that train originally. And so now it has twice as much energy, and now it's going to lose half the energy when you make it a heavier train, even though it has the same momentum. So sometimes it uses half the energy, but it has the same momentum. Again, how is that logically possible for you people? How can you believe something like that? How can you believe you lost half your momentum and yet you have the same, energy? How could you believe that could possibly be a circumstance where that could be true, where you actually lost momentum, and yet you still have energy, the same energy? All right, energy is always conserved, according to mainstream science. So I just played the physics girl video, obviously overtly saying momentum is always conserved, and energy isn't. That's what Professor Lewin said. Momentum. He said you can't fuck with momentum. Overtly said it. So Professor Lewin's wrong, Julian Sumner's wrong, Physics Girl is wrong, and yet he's arguing with me. Amazing. And he's telling me I'm not allowed to find something flawed in his physics when he's overtly admitting that, oh yeah, no, some of our best physicists are idiots. They don't even know high school physics. They don't even know high school experiments. So somehow Physics Girl didn't go to high school that day. Right? She went to Disneyland that day. Professor Lewin missed it. This is just moronic. All right. That's the small object has twice the kinetic energy when half the mass and double the velocity means it had to be thrown with twice the energy. So again, he says the bullet has to be thrown with 2,000 times as much energy as the 2 kilograms going 1 mile an hour. So the dime going 1,000 miles an hour requires 2,000 times the energy to launch that the 2 kilogram bottle does. Even though the spaceship's going to get the same thrust out of those two things. Well, I guess it'd be pretty stupid to shoot bullets, dimes out of your spaceship then, because boy, you're really wasting your energy, aren't you? Because you get just as much bang for your buck by spending the 2 joules to send the 2 kilograms off. I mean, this is such bad physics. All right, it means it had to be thrown with twice the energy to get that speed. So do you other, he says, clear, question mark? How the fuck would this be clear? All right, the guy's obviously saying you have no evidence, and you still provide no evidence, just more assertions. Oh. All right, so the Burton guy says, why would I need to be thrown with twice the energy if it had the same momentum? Your explanation is still not getting to the core of the issue, but seeing how DS has apparently blocked me, which I didn't do, even though I was arguing on his side, he can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. Well, whatever. That didn't happen. All right. I mean, you would think you would be invested in these arguments, not for my sake, but for your own clarity. Like, you're finding a bunch of people talking shit physics, and you should be saying something like, you should be in it for yourself. And it shouldn't matter what I'm doing. But, that's me, frankly. I mean, that's how I would be looking at the circumstance. You understand it. Okay, so Jerry Hall, this is mindless marvel to Jerry. You understand it. It cannot claim conservation of momentum. He cannot claim conservation of momentum always holds, and at the same time say that momentum can be converted into heat and potential energy. So let's understand. I never even talk about potential energy, so that's just a crazy lie to even bring that up, because as I've stated before, this, unless you're going to talk about chemical reactions, we're not talking about potential energy, because nothing has, when you move something in gravity, the object doesn't have potential energy. Okay, the environment has the energy, and the environment will impose the energy, the force. The object doesn't have any potential energy. Okay, it's just circumstantial to the environmental position. So you wouldn't hardly say it's its potential energy, because it isn't its potential energy. It's the environment has the momentum. Gravity is going to impose the momentum, okay? The object didn't have any. So, again, it's your inability to understand physics that's at the root of this bullshit, okay? So I've tried to explain, this isn't that complicated, right? So momentum, as they point out, is a vector, okay? It's an arrow, all right? That's your momentum. Okay, your mass and your velocity. So the size of the arrow, you could say, is the combination of the two. But you could say that your mass is, as I've pointed out, your mass is essentially a platform, and your velocity is built on top of it. So the smaller your platform, the higher your velocity has to be to have the same momentums. Okay, so it's just that sort of simple. The mass is the platform. The velocity is what you pile on the platform, and you're really just saying that, yes, this spread out is equal to the same volume as this. This volume is the same as this volume. All right. So anyway, so momentum is a vector. So what I'm obviously saying is that if I hit something sloppy, okay, in the sense that, I'm deforming it, I'm breaking it into pieces, and so pieces are flying off in these directions. Well, those pieces have momentum that come out of my momentum. So their movement is my movement. So obviously if I hit something and it breaks, my energy is now being converted into the wrong direction. So it's not momentum in this direction anymore. It's these little arrows here. So my momentum arrow now is smaller. Okay, so whatever this stuff adds up to, that's how much less momentum I have to hit something and make it go. So if I convert it into heat first, I'm not going to give it to this object. But the truth is I can, okay, do it the other way around. I can hit the object nice and clean, okay, and I can give it momentum. All right, and now it can do something in the environment. It can hit some atmospheric molecules and or it could hit a piece of, some sort of bigger piece of matter and make it go in some direction. And as I'm doing that, these are all losses of my momentum. So if I'm making heat now with this object, I already gave it my momentum. So I have its momentum is still going this way. My momentum is still going that way. So this arrow gets reduced by the length of that arrow. So I have these two arrows going in the same. So let me just make this an object so it makes more sense. So so the velocity of this object is reduced because now I have a bigger total mass. So now my net velocity of both objects is lower. Okay, but the fact is I still have all of my vector. I still have all of my momentum until I start hitting things, and then those things end up dissipating the energy in some other direction. So as long as I keep the energy in this direction, my momentum is conserved, and it's still conserved when you're converting it into heat. It's just that you can't convert it into heat first and then give it to something. That you can't do. So it's just the order that it ends up getting converted into heat. And the argument is in the universe, this is basically the system. That the tendency is for this momentum, this direction, to inevitably be lost. Okay, you're inevitably going to hit things, and your momentum is going to get reduced and reduced and reduced in this direction, because you're going to hit little atoms, and you're going to hit things, and you're going to hit things, and you're going to hit things, and as you hit things going in other directions, causing them to go in other directions, the momentum going in this direction is eventually lost to heat. Everything just dissipates into the heat. So yeah, heat is the death of the momentum, in the sense that it's the death of it as a vector in a direction. Your energy is the arrow, the momentum is in a direction, and heat is where you killed the direction, and therefore it's still your momentum, it's still your motion that's causing some other motion, that's causing some other motion, that's causing some other motion, but those motions don't have your vector anymore, so they're not counted as part of your momentum. But as energy in the universe, there's still energy in the universe. So it's just about the order you do it. Okay, you can't transfer it to heat, okay, and then convert it back into momentum. Okay, that you can't do. You can convert your momentum into another object and then convert it into heat. That you can do. And you could have 5 objects here, And as long as I don't convert it into heat in any one of these interactions, then I keep my momentum. So your momentum's only lost is when you start making things move in the wrong direction. What you would call your energy. Like I said, it's in some sense it's a word game, because it doesn't matter which direction, it's still motion in a direction. It's just that you're not following that motion. The motion you're following is the motion in one direction. So again, it's the laser beam. I can take the laser beam and I can scatter it. Well, once I've scattered it, I can't sit there and shoot and burn a hole in something, because I've lost my momentum in all kinds of directions. But I can burn a hole into something and then lose the energy in all kinds of scatter. All right. Side, he can go to hell's fire. Okay. You understand, he cannot claim conservation of momentum always holds and at the same time say that momentum can be converted into heat or potential energy. So of course it can. It always ends up. You can't kill the energy. So again, it's just about its direction. I don't know how else to say that. I mean, I think I've made it clear enough for a reasonable person, but these aren't reasonable people, unfortunately. So that's mindless marble saying something that dumb. Okay, that's a bit of a straw man. So this is Amos. He's referring to the kinetic energy formula as portrayed in the Physics Girl video and elsewhere, where in an inelastic collision it loses a lot of energy to deformation, etc., except the momentum stays the same. So again, the argument is that somehow you've successfully poured the paint, the momentum, into another object. The whole vector is in the new object. How can I make other momentums if I got all of my momentum into the other object? It's impossible. He's saying that in order to have lost the lost energy in the collision, you'd have to also reduce momentum as well, because the object is going to slow down. So yes, you can't keep your momentum and make heat. You can't do it. It's impossible. That's the simple argument. You can't have friction, you can't make heat, you can't make noise, you can't make all kinds of things and keep your momentum. Can't do it. So, Daimil, he says, I will try to explain it. I will just take Newton's second law and will not use any equation of energy. So let's say that I have he's going to use that, so I see the equation all over the place. I have a body of mass m, which I apply a constant force. So again, this is not about a constant force, so it's just more wasted time. There's no constant force in these circumstances, so it's just an absolute waste of fucking goddamn time to keep talking about constant forces. Constant forces are like gravity, can continually pushing, adding energy. These are not circumstances where you're adding energy. You're converting energy from one thing to another energy. You're exchanging it. You're deaccelerating one thing and accelerating something else. And we know that in the Newton cradle kind of example, that process happens completely. That the momentum is almost like a blob of something is completely transferred, okay, almost instantaneously. That there isn't any this decelerates and this accelerates process, because if that existed, you'd have the logical problem, like once you got to half the speed, once this decelerated to half the speed and this increased to half the speed, then this is going to leave. And so how could this object ever stop if it can't transfer the rest of its energy? So this whole formula has absolutely nothing to do with this circumstance at all. It doesn't show any evidence of any of their assertions. Nowhere in this is you're going to show me this less energy, that you can't move the lighter object twice as fast. None of this is going to be shown anywhere in this crap. So nowhere in this crap are they going to explain how the recoil of the gun isn't exactly the same energy as the motion of the bullet. That the two momentums, the momentum of the gun is the same as the momentum of the bullet. They're not going to show anywhere how that's not true anymore, because the bullet left with 1.4 times the energy. Alright, so, it's just all talk, no evidence. Alright, back again. Alright, so Mindless Marvel says, how is that a straw man? So you keep arguing that somehow I'm saying that you're refusing to understand the order in which I'm saying you can lose energy to heat. You can't lose the energy to heat and then transfer your energy to something else, the same energy. If you lost it to heat, you lost it. It's gone. You lost it out of your momentum. Your momentum had to create the heat. That's the simple argument. The heat doesn't come from anything, from nowhere. The heat comes directly out of your momentum. You can't keep your momentum and make heat and transfer your momentum. You can't do those things unless you do them in the right order. You have to transfer it and then create heat. Okay. How is that a straw man? If momentum is lost to heat, then momentum is not conserved because it's fucking lost to heat. So again, you can't understand that it has to be in the right order. You can't scatter the laser beam and then burn a hole in something with the scattered laser beam. You can burn a hole in something and then scatter the laser beam. That's right. So you do it in the right order, no problem. Why is this hard for people to understand? Question mark. Yeah, why is that so hard for you to understand, Mindless Marvels? Oh, it's because you're an idiot. A lying idiot. Okay. So more from Mindless. He's saying that in order to have lost energy in a collision, you have to also reduce momentum as well, because the object is going to slow down. Oh, and by the way, thanks for explaining how Gary is advocating we abandon Newton. So again, why all this? Why do you have to exaggerate and pervert everything I say if you have such great arguments? Clearly, I'm saying that Newton's physics was correct in terms of understanding momentum as energy, and that he predicted the movement of all the crap in the universe quite well with that theory. You're saying there was something fundamentally wrong with that theory because it had energy completely wrong, and that somehow we needed to fix it. And I'm just wondering why. All right, contrary to Newton's third law. So again, I never said, I clearly made this statement about what's wrong with Newton's law. Newton's law is the opposite reaction has something to do with the environment fighting back. When clearly I'm arguing that if I give away a direction, if I give away I'm going this arrow, if I give away that arrow, it means inside of me, before I gave that arrow away, I must have had another arrow going the opposite way for me to have equilibrium. For me to not be moving, I'd have to. So I'm going to change my equilibrium when I give something away. If I give away $10, if I have $20 and I give away $10, obviously I only have $10 now. And it's, and I'm just pointing out that the $10 is in the opposite direction. That's the point, shithead. And again, just to keep evading those points, he says that momentum can be reduced between two objects. I don't know, where did I say that? Which contradicts Newton's third law in Newtonian mechanics. No, Pirot's argument contradicts Newton's third law quite clearly. If I apply the same force and I'm going to get 1.4 the energy out, then I've broken Newton's law. Alright. Damel. Gary also write that F equals m times v. Well, it's pretty clear that's how Newton looked at it, fuckhead. So if you want to go back, well, again, Physics Girl just said in a video, well, Newton actually said that, force equals change in momentum over change in time. So essentially, Newton was saying, if I make time 1, then what's the momentum? Oh yeah, that's right, it's mv, retard. So that's essentially what Newton was saying, F equals mv. So you're the ones lying about what Newton said. Newton didn't write F equals ma. Newton wrote F equals momentum divided by time. Change in momentum. Which is against the first and second laws, so Gary is against all Newton laws. So again, just more incoherent, drivelly nonsense. Just an overt lie. Applying absolutely no... they have complete contempt for the truth, and here they are defending the truth. I mean, it's just such a joke. Okay, and then Mindless says, yep, Gary doesn't worship Newton, he only pretends to. I don't worship Newton, clearly. I'm just making the simple argument that I clearly don't worship Leibniz like you do. Clearly he was just a carnival barker in the middle of this whole physics thing. He just stole other people's ideas and recontextualized them, and clearly he had a huge resentment towards Newton. He didn't like Newton's metaphysics. He didn't like anything about Newton, and all of this was invented out of his pettiness, and that's it. And here you are, you're the one glorifying that as good science when it's horrible science. Again, nobody bought it, because frankly Leibniz would have been buried as a homeless pauper, okay, if it wasn't for the fact that they had a family that still owned him, even though he wasn't producing anything, and they buried him. And Newton was buried as a king. All right. Why would it need to be thrown with twice the energy? So this is Pirot. Why would it need to be thrown with twice the energy if it has the same momentum? Question mark. So Pirot is going to answer that question. Because momentum is not energy. So Newton certainly thought so. Clearly, I think so. It's the only what use is the word. If it isn't energy, what is it? What the fuck is momentum if it isn't your capacity to move objects in space? What is it then? It takes more energy to get small mass object to the same momentum as a large one. So it just doesn't make any sense. So he's saying I can give momentum to heavy things easier than I can give momentum to small things. When isn't every experience you have in the real world exactly the opposite? The heavier it is, the harder it is to give the momentum to. Sometimes I can't even move the heavy things. Where the light things, it's so fucking easy. Boosh, there, it's going. The spring stores energy, not momentum. So again, more nonsense about what the distinction could possibly be. The spring stores the capacity to cause movement. The spring was going to move the spring. The spring is actually going to move, okay? The metal in the spring is going to change its position in space. and all of the velocity of all that change and all of that is built into the spring, as a certain amount of mass is going to move a certain speed, and it can transfer that energy to some other object and launch it with its momentum. It's clearly stored momentum. So Amos says, it seems like you're making assertions. You say it requires twice as much energy to get the 5-pound object up to 10 miles per hour as opposed to the 10-pound object to 5 miles an hour, even though the momentum is the same. But I've yet to see any clear explanation for why that would be, or any experimental evidence for it. I guess this is never going to end. Yes, that's right. They'll never produce any evidence. They'll just make assertions. And they'll make assertions that they're talking real physics when the real physicists don't agree, and say overtly the opposite. So this was supposed to make sense somehow to somebody. You're not allowed to question our physics even though we don't even agree with our physics, is what they're saying. Even though our physicists don't agree about what the physics is, you're not allowed to disagree with them, even though they don't even have an agreed on position. All right, let's see. Let me know when you figure out how anything I said was either a straw man or incorrect. Well, I pointed out how it's pretty fucking incorrect, juice bag. All right. Let me know when you have any physical evidence for your claims that a 5-pound object at 10 miles an hour requires twice as much energy as a 10-pound object moving 5 miles an hour. So that'll be interesting to see what Mindless's response. Here you go. Okay, so here we have evidence, apparently, of the lighter object requiring twice as much energy to move, or 1.4. Oh, fuck. Well, now we don't have evidence, do we? Okay, so this is the worst kind of piece of crap you could possibly. So I can't believe that Mindless Marbles has now lost so much of his integrity. He's just giving it away week after week, and now he actually is going to say that's good physics. Those experiments were well done and well presented. Man, I mean, how low will you go? I mean, really, how low will you go? It's just amazing. Two objects with the same momentum generate. It's hard to believe this is Mindless Marbles. Maybe it's just Farley. I mean, I can't believe Mindless Marbles is this much of a troll now. Let's see, re-upload. Oh, so he's re-uploaded the Quora, where, yeah, I had a brain fart and, didn't realize that, in gravity, the lighter object goes 4 times. You have to go 4 times higher to create twice the velocity. So yeah, I made a mistake, and what does he do? He re-uploads the mistake, even though I admit the mistake. It was a mistake, nothing I can do about it. And he's asserting that somehow because I made a mistake, that means everything I'm saying is wrong. Okay, well that's really, really, really low class. But go ahead, just demonstrate who you are. Yeah, so it's really him. What a piece of fucking shit. Okay, the PM system on YouTube is really bad. It doesn't work anymore, fuckhead, so you probably should change this. Okay. So, and he has his email address. I mean, what a fucking piece of work. What a lying sack of scum. Alright, 2 objects with the same momentum generate different amounts of electricity. Okay, so says bro. Okay, but we have no evidence that's actually what took place. I mean, the electricity experiments had no details at all. So we have no clue what he was using or how he was doing those experiments. The one with half the mass but twice the velocity generates twice the amount of electricity. And so we have no way of knowing how he's generating the electricity. Obviously it's a little bit complicated because it's, again, dependent on velocity. And if you're making a complete transfer of the motion, and so obviously you can be creating more heat in one circumstance and less heat in the other circumstance. You can be more efficient in how you transfer the movement into electricity, and so all that's going to matter. But whatever. So he's just, again, he's claiming he has great evidence on his side, and that's what he has to resort to, is the piece of shit video by Stephen Bro. So until that video showed up, we didn't have any good evidence. You can't find something more credible, like in a college or something. here's the thing. If I say something incorrect or I strawman anyway, I want to know about it. You know, you lie constantly, so I can correct myself. You're not interested in any self-correction. So I should just find any mistake you make, and I should just build a monument to it, right? So all the mistakes you've ever made, I should just build a little monument to it somewhere. I can make a video, a little monument to your mistakes, and that'll prove that you're completely incapable of ever getting a right answer. And I don't have to deal with your arguments anymore, because I can just pretend because you made a mistake, everything you say is shit. Because that's what you do with logic. That's how you apply logic. Okay. I would be interested to see what it is that I said that isn't true. Well, he clearly asked you for the evidence, and you clearly didn't provide any. Any evidence that he didn't already explain to you was crap. But okay, so here's going to explain. I'm honestly amazed you linked me to that video. So, something as fundamental as kinetic energy formula and the concept I described, and the only physical evidence we have is this one amateur video of a backyard experiment. Yeah, so here we are in this context of a 300-year-old idea. So in 300 years, all the millions of scientists that have done all the millions of experiments, and they don't have any evidence of this kinetic energy. They believe it, but they don't have any experiments showing them collecting it. So we're supposed to believe. That makes sense. That we don't need evidence. Evidence. We have a perversion of Newton's formula. Isn't that enough? And clearly it is a perversion, right? Newton wrote F equals change in momentum, change in mv over time, which is the same thing as saying F equals mv. Because if you start with 0, okay, final mv is the momentum, so there's your answer. F equals mv. Experiments that have no documentation attached, no way of knowing what the velocities are correct, no details whatsoever on how the main mechanisms work, nothing. I don't agree with a lot of draft science physics, but he was correct. But he was correct in highlighting, in detailing. His detailing of the problems with that video is really the best you have. Yeah, well, you can find new ones too. When he's doing the thing where the little pawns or the little chess pieces are lifted by gravity. The problem was he didn't make pieces that were heavy enough. You can't use gravity as a test if your velocity is too fast. So if you're transferring the fast velocity, we already know that gravity has a bias for things going. Lighter things. Lighter things go higher in gravity, a lot higher in gravity. So if you give them velocity that's faster than the thread is moving, obviously they'll go higher because they have that extra velocity. They're very light. So if you give them too much velocity, the pieces will be launched rather than just lifted. There's a difference between lifting something against gravity and jerking, and giving something a velocity into gravity. And so that was the big flaw that you can notice if you look at the tape again. You can notice that the one piece does fly up and then it goes sideways and moves around. So it isn't going to the natural height, it's going to an unnatural height because it was given too much velocity for its size, for its weight. All right, mechanism work. Let's see, where are we at? Backyard experiments. Experiments have nothing. Really the best you have. Are you telling me the kinetic energy formula was never experimentally proven until this 2001 video with highly questionable experiments? Yes, what is your evidence? Where is the experiment that shows the kinetic energy formula saving the day? Where it comes to the rescue. Momentum fails to get a right answer, and we need this kinetic energy formula to show us what energy really is. Show us that experiment. Alright, so Amos says again, experiments are supposed to be done so they can be repeated and verified, and that is the core of the scientific method, detailing the machinery and materials and produced, what time each experiment was performed, the actual data. Yes, they're supposed to be done decent. Stephen Bro, many comments to see how desperately he wants to prove DS wrong, and how he personally he is in this and bringing bias to the equation. But on top of that, we have no details whatsoever for the experiments and the results. Issues have been brought up with how they are performed, and they haven't been repeated or verified. Is this one video with numerous problems really all there is to support the fundamental concept in physics and the scenario I described? Yes, so it's just preposterous to think that we can't find a better source of evidence than Stephen Bro's bullshit. All right, so Mindless says, I've done experiments myself. So this is somehow, so that means something. I've done an experiment myself, getting the spring to push various pendulum balls and see what height they reach. So again, he's doing it into gravity. So again, trying to tell us that somehow gravity isn't overtly biased for lighter objects. So of course the lighter object goes higher in gravity. There's no dispute. The fact is, though, it comes down with the same momentum. It doesn't come down with twice as much energy. So even though the kinetic energy formula says the lighter object going higher has 4 times the amount of energy or twice as much energy, right? It has twice as much energy, went 4 times higher in gravity, twice as much energy. We know when it lands it's not going to have twice as much energy. So we know that's a big farce. So why are you pretending that is real physics? In a freshman physics lab a year ago. I don't have the videotape of that, however. So again, no one else has repeated that physics experiment. So no other, you went to a special college where they did all the really cool experiments, and none of the other colleges know how to do any of those really cool experiments, huh? Literally a quick stop to any physics lab would demonstrate this idea as bunk. So why can't you produce one fucking video, as I have from years ago? So again, just nothing. You think everyone is somehow avoiding these types of experiments. He doesn't say anything about why these experiments aren't done, but I'd say it's clearly the same reason why very few people talk about the single slit experiment while they talk about the double slit experiment, because they can't really tell the silly double slit story if they're showing the single slit doing the same thing. Or somehow no one has noticed that the kinetic energy doesn't tell us anything about fuel or power consumption over 300 years. So again, it didn't tell anybody about fuel or power consumption 200 years ago when it was invented, 300 years ago invented by Leibniz and then the French. So none of those people were relying on fuel consumption bullshit, which is again completely just made up. If somebody tells you that a pound of hydrogen has 5 million joules in it, or they tell you it has 250 million joules in it, you're not going to know the difference. They can make up any number they want. Okay, then you are the ones with the incredulous conspiracy theory. So again, there's no conspiracy theory cited, just bad science. That's the excuse, bad science. I've illustrated and pointed it out. I mean, it was clearly bad science to sit there and use clay experiments and say clay is a really good way to collect energy, when clearly it could be understood it has a bias for fast things. Okay, it's not just physicists that would have to have had missed this. Every mechanical, electrochemical, nuclear. So again, just more horseshit that any of this ever has relevancy unless you're making real comparisons. It doesn't matter if you get the wrong answers, okay, except in space. I'd say that yes, NASA doesn't use kinetic energy formula. So if you can show me a NASA engineer deciding how much thrust to shoot out of the lunar module based on the kinetic energy theory, then you might have an argument. But you'll never find that, because they know it really is just a momentum argument. They know they're releasing momentum out of their nozzles, and that's all that's going to matter, is the momentum they release. This is anti-vaxxer levels of stupidities, whatever that is, vaxxers. So you don't think there's any reason to be a little bit apprehensive about vaccines? I wouldn't want to take one if I don't have to, frankly. Right? So, I mean, that's not even a good subject. You'd be better off talking about 9/11, because there's no reason for those silly conspiracies. Okay. Now, let me go over some of your points about Bro's experiment and why they didn't hold water. This is an excellent demonstration of how bad the criticisms really are. So he really thinks it's a good video. Amazing. He thinks these are the way you should document experiments, by not documenting them at all. I mean, he has crap just drawn on the thing, lines. He doesn't have things lined up evenly. I mean, it's a mess. So anyway, no way to know the velocities are correct. So there's no evidence that he got it right. There's none. No evidence of us being able to see the velocities are correct. The lever mechanism guarantees that. So that's just nonsense. Levers are subject to bouncing. There's lots of issues that levers have when they're pushing the momentum. And you have to understand they're pushing the heavier masses closer. So the heavier mass is causing bending and stress in this part of the lever. The lighter mass is causing bending and stress in the whole length of the lever. So there are two different mechanisms there. So there's a whole bunch of technicalities to using a lever to produce momentum. And so you can just lie and pretend those aren't real, but they are real, and it's not that hard to prove. So you just do the lever without anything in the way and see if your two objects are moving the right speeds. What's so complicated? That's how you do experiments. You do a control first to see if it's actually producing. So he's against doing controlled experiments to establish the reliability of something. You should just say it's guaranteed. Guaranteed. It works every time. You can't fuck it up, it's basically saying. There's no way he could have fucked up a lever. Yeah, there's all kinds of ways you can fuck up a lever. There's all kinds of ways you can interrupt the velocity, the smoothness of the lever. All kinds of things can get in the way. It's just absolutely nonsense to say it doesn't matter. And especially when he did nothing to diminish friction as part of the equation. So we have no analysis representing any kind of idea of how much friction is affecting the two objects. All right. I mean, just amazing that he would defend this crap. Outer object is released with twice the velocity of the inner object in circular motion at fixed angular velocity. Again, this isn't circular motion. It's one tiny little vector. So all he did is make a lever and made it this little bit of movement. You know, and he's supposed to give the two objects perfect velocities with this little bit of movement. Yeah, I think there's reason to doubt that worked. Now, if you're talking about spinning and then releasing, well, then you know you've established the velocity. Then you know the objects that are stuck on the wheel do actually have the momentum now. They're actually carrying the momentum. Once you've accelerated the object, then you're finished accelerating. Were these objects finished and being accelerated? Do you have any evidence that they actually have the momentum? Okay. That the transfer was complete? No, we have no evidence whatsoever. No details on how the mechanism works. These are not complicated experiments. Oh, please. He has an experiment where he's shoving something into a coil to create electricity. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated. We don't get to have any details? Okay. There's enough here to recreate the experiment. What it is, what is it that's not clear? Well, he just listed a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't clear, but I listed a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't clear in my video. How pulleys work? Yeah, well, how heavy are the object you're lifting? Are they heavy enough so you don't jolt them up into, give them velocity that's faster than the weight of the object, and therefore you're not transferring the momentum. You're transferring too much momentum and therefore going faster than the thread is going. So you're outpacing the bit of energy that hits you, the impact energy. How capacitors works, how levers work. Well, all those things are in doubt, aren't they? It's kind of silly. Nobody, again, who takes an experiment for granted like that? Nobody. Everybody wants everything as much stuff detailed as possible. He was correct in detailing the problems with that video. I gave my replies to your criticism, so this is the extent of his excuse making. That it's fine. We already guaranteed it's the right velocities because you used the lever and somehow you can't use the lever incorrectly or inappropriately or sloppily or any of that kind of stuff. We don't get to see the spring that moved the lever. We don't get to see any of the mechanism. We don't know anything about how much friction there is. But yes, we can be guaranteed it's the right result. Oh, bullshit. It's so obvious bullshit. Anyway, if you have any other if you have other of your numerous critiques, you can post them here. I would love to see them. It's very clear what the results indicate. So I would argue, is it very clear that the object being lifted in gravity was too light? Was that very clear to you? Because it's now very clear to me. Will you concede the argument? And again, you can't even comment on the other experiments. How can somebody critique something they can't see? You can't even see it. He has the frickin' image of some porn crap on top of it. How can you even see the experiment? Oh, anyway. All right, I want to see more of these issues you're referring to. So he keeps, okay, so the Burton guy had already given up for whatever reason. And he keeps pretending, look, I won the argument because you didn't continue the argument. So to summarize what happened here so far, let's go over it. Jerry Hall and I pointed out a contradiction in Gary's reasoning. So there's no contradiction, it's just a grotesque lie. So just more horseshit that somehow I said that I didn't make it clear that if you create heat, you can't still have your momentum. Your momentum has to be lost to the creation of heat. That's what I've overtly said, and that can't be denied by any evidence in the universe. All right. You say that it's a bit of a straw man. Let's see what I don't know if this is worth reading. I ask you how anything I said was a straw man incorrect. He answered. Okay, I replied, provide you with physical evidence. You didn't provide any physical evidence of anything. Amazing. Stephen Bro shows backyard experiments anyone can replicate, including you. Again, so he's all for a bunch of half-ass shit experiments. That's the way physics should be done. Let's do it all half-ass. Let's do a bunch of clay experiments and call it the real world. I mean, it's just, that's get you wrong answers, jackass. That's why your physics sucks, and it's why you suck. It's because you don't have any goddamn, you're the huge hypocrite. If your life depended on the experiment, you sure as hell wouldn't be trusting Stephen Bro. You reject this, claim there's numerous problems with the video, yet you only provide a few criticisms which I immediately address. You didn't address any of the criticisms. How do you know what the electric experiment was even? There's no details at all. I asked for more of your criticisms. You failed to answer again. So anyway, just more horse shit. So he's just basically saying, look, I won the argument because he's not arguing anymore. Anyway, just amazing. Anyone can scroll through this thread and verify the sequence of events themselves. Well, they can clearly see how you're a fucking liar. All right, and anyone who says otherwise is a despicable human being, because it's definitely proven. Okay, a bunch of preposterous exaggerations and complete distortions of what I said. These aren't quotes of me. These aren't anything near getting it right or the truth. Not giving a fuck that I go to extreme lengths to point out an argument. I draw it and show. Look, I'm talking about the pins. The pins can't hit each other if you lost the energy to heat. I make it clear. And they overtly pervert it for their purposes. They lie about what I said, and over and over again. All right, now you have 2 requests that you failed to reply. So again, this harassment that he somehow has to continue a conversation with an idiot defending really overtly horrible physics experiments. So just amazing. So what are the straw mans in my comments that were a straw man or incorrect? So again, your comment that I somehow cited that there was anything contradictory in my explanation of how energy converts into heat is exactly that. It's just a lie. Okay. What are the issues with Stephen Bro's video that invalidate them? So again, he went through enough of them. The fact is, it's the ugliest, stinkiest, smellingest, disgusting, worst physics. Is there a worse example of an experiment performed on YouTube? Is there somebody doing an experiment in more of a tinfoil hat, shitty manner than Stephen Bro's video? I say it wins the Oscar for being the stupidest, most moronic thing ever presented as a physics experiment. It's so fucking bad. All right, first of all, we already said send to daft idiot experiments for kinetic energy. So there is no evidence, there's no sent videos. This is just a lie. I've played every single thing they've ever linked to. There's no fucking goddamn video I have denied anyone any access to. So just more fucking lies by these fucking liars. Alright, you can see previous videos from him. You can see that we already sent experiments which of course they prove that the formula for kinetic energy is correct. So again, nothing like that ever happened. This is just such a gross lie. Also, some people send him experiments in Quora. So again, nothing is in Quora. There's no experiments in Quora. There's no evidence in Quora. There's no reasoning in Quora. There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is just such a gross lie. Also, as I prove to you you will get the same result if you use only Newton's laws. Well, that doesn't even make any sense. Obviously, the two formulas have fundamentally different answers, so you are obviously insane. So if you say that if two bodies have the same momentum, we will need the same energy to give to the two bodies with different masses, of course, the same momentum, that means that Newton's laws are wrong, but of course this is ridiculous. So again, he's not, how do you make any sense out of this idiot? What the fuck are you saying? Both answers can't be right, shithead. One says 144 joules and 77 joules. One says, say, 100 and 100. Two completely different descriptions of the reality. The formula for kinetic energy is already verified, 19th century. Also, you can see it very easy in elastic collisions in an elastic collision. If you want to find what to be velocities after the collision, you need conservation of momentum and conservation of energy. So again, they both can't be conserved. It's clearly what physics girl said. You can't conserve the momentum and conserve the kinetic energy. Can't happen. Also, if you agree that the work is WFD dx, that means that the formula for kinetic energy is 100% correct. So again, just more statements, not any evidence. If you don't agree with the formula for work, I would like to give me a correct formula for work. I've already told you the correct formula for everything is mv. Momentum is energy, is force, is work. It's all one thing. There isn't any other things. They're not separate things. You can't do work without energy. You can't have energy without momentum. You can't have momentum without velocity and mass. The end. When we talk about work of a force, what could be correct formula? I already said that. The Lagrangian mechanics use the formula, so it's again more horse shit than any of these mechanics have anything to do with anything real on Earth, when of course they never apply to any real world experiment. They're just for, you're doing electron experiments where you can just make it all up. For kinetic energy, you need to take the equations for motion from the Lagrangian mechanics, and of course they are the same with the equations for motion and only Newton's laws. All this crap, is it the same? It's not the same. Let's see if we can get here. If you have the experiment, and it is amazing that the daft idiot wants to give other people $2,000, but he doesn't use the money to get equipment and do the experiment for himself. Well, again, why would I redundantly buy equipment somebody else already has? You don't even understand that efficiency, you fucking idiot. But of course, if he do the experiment, he lie about them and show an experiment of Walter Lewin, and he just lie about it. So again, something in showing Walter Lewin doing the experiment, he says there's a lie built into it somewhere. Somewhere I lied about the experiment, or I lied about something, and somehow my lie was so much more powerful than Walter Lewin's own words. You can't fuck with momentum, which is basically his own words. Okay, it always has to be conserved. You can't make momentum disappear. But kinetic energy, apparently that is fudgeable. I lie because Lewin says those words. That means I lied. Okay. Pretty sure he's seen it all, or soon will. Why don't you just say, I don't have any evidence that he has evaded any of your evidence, so please give me a list of your great evidence and I'll convey it to him. So why don't you just ask them to produce their great evidence list, and I'll go watch their evidence list. Do you know the link of the physics girl video? So this is Puro. He's always complaining about. Well, I've played it in my video, so why would you need the link? Just go to the physics girl videos on my videos, and I'm playing the fucking video, idiot. I imagine his misunderstanding is similar to him not understanding and denying with Lewin's video the difference between a spring between two movable carts versus a spring between an unmovable wall and a movable cart. So again, even though this last video I played pointed out quite clearly that the momentum formula holds no matter what the mass is, it didn't say, it just says you could change the ratio infinitely. It didn't imply there was some limit. So I could make it 100 pounds on one side and 4 ounces on the other side, or I could make it the Empire State Building on one side, and they think there's some point where the whole thing breaks down because now it's not a movable object. There's no such point. It holds. Lewin's saying basically it holds, okay? It doesn't matter how heavy I can make it. The little crappy video I played earlier in this video shows clearly the woman doesn't say, oh yeah, but when you get to the mass is unmovable, then it changes and this object gets a whole bunch more energy. They didn't say anything like that. So there's no indication that this is true, that it makes any difference. And I made the logical argument, well, if nothing changes, I go from, all right, 2 carts of the same mass. I double the mass of this cart, nothing changes over here. I triple the mass of this cart, nothing changes over here. I quadruple the mass of this cart, nothing changes over here. Haven't I already proved the principle? Do they really think there's some magical moment where all of a sudden it will make a difference? No, it'll never make a difference. All right, between a spring between 2 movable carts versus a spring between an unmovable wall and a movable cart. So Pirro still thinks that the experiment we all need is putting the spring, Bro essentially did that, so Pirro has so little confidence in Stephen Bruff that he won't even cite that video and point out how, well, look, Stephen Bruff did it. He has an unmovable spring. The spring is attached to the surface, and the spring is going to shoot an object. So it's an unmovable spring attached at one end to an unmovable object, and it shoots the 2 objects. Clearly, the 2 objects are going one half the velocity because it's twice the mass. So he already did it. Stephen Bruff did the experiment, and these idiots are sitting here saying blah, 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 blah. So I should just cite you to go to Steve's video. So go to Steve's video, watch that experiment and explain it. I'm making the assertions which are claims of mainstream science. So this is Pirro talking. So again, it's clearly not mainstream science. It's not, Sumner, Julian Sumner, physics is my business. It's not him, it's not Physics Girl, and it's not Lewin. So we got 3 physicists right there that you're not talking for. You can verify or deny them with experiments. So he just keeps ambiguously indicating there's some experiment somewhere, yet there's no experiment. In 300 years, they haven't recorded the experiment. You seem to believe that the hundreds-of-year-old concept was never tested. It was tested with clay experiments, with gimmicks. So yeah, they went out into the world and they found the aberrant experiment. Not the one that was consistent and always gave reliable results. No, they found the experiment that looked funny. And that's the one they went with. Okay. And that's good physics in your opinion. And it is just a hoax. So again, more nonsense about any conspiracy theories or hoax. No, you're idiots. As you're demonstrating, you're illogical, undisciplined idiots. And that's why physics sucks, is because you don't have any integrity as thinking beings. You're duplicitous, dishonest, creepy motherfuckers who keep trying to make your metaphysics into physics. Okay, but to the contrary, it has been tested and done in high schools and colleges all the time as well. So again, all this stuff that isn't, somehow it doesn't get online. So even though Professor Lewin did 150 lectures in 3 different series of physics demonstrations, it doesn't get covered. Somehow that experiment never got done. And every college in the country, somehow that experiment never got videotaped for some reason. The Yale guy never did experiments, so we're out of luck with him. But I just looked at the one in San Francisco, and he doesn't have the experiments either. So, why don't you just do the experiment and prove? See, they don't assert any of this 1.4 stuff. So the professor's obviously not going to do an experiment that he doesn't even believe exists. I've never seen a college professor say fast objects only leave the spring at 1.4 the velocity. Okay, none of them say that. You don't believe me? Good news. Do the experiment. So again, he can't cite a single college professor asserting what he's asserting. He can't cite a single experiment, and yet he just keeps badgering people as if they're an idiot for not believing. He has no evidence. He can't even reference something like a piece of evidence, like a physicist saying that's what I believe. And yet we're all supposed to believe Pirro. even though we don't have a physicist saying the same thing Piro's saying. I'm telling you scientific results are not published as YouTube videos. Well, of course they are all over the place. So that's, again, just couldn't be a sillier statement. There are literally hundreds of thousands of science experiments published on YouTube. If you don't like the results to be told to you, you have one option: do the experiment yourself. So again, I'm supposed to, like, say I don't trust LIGO. I'm supposed to do the LIGO experiment myself. I don't trust all the whole, LHC horse shit. Oh, I'm supposed to do it myself. Yeah, fuck you. These experiments have been done since the invention of the concept of energy. So again, more lies about these experiments that have been done. Clearly, the 1700s, they didn't do any sophisticated experiments. They did one experiment over and over again, because it was the only one that worked. And they never touched a spring. Before then, even, it's why Leibniz was already onto a fact that energy was proportional to mv squared. So even though it's 100% wrong, and you had to fix it because it was 100% wrong, you're still defending Leibniz's nutsy, silly nonsense. Even though Leibniz was Newton's worst enemy, the whole formula was contrived merely as a gimmick. Okay, Leibniz died nobody. Okay, nobody showed up at his funeral. No one. Okay, so he clearly didn't sell this to anybody reasonable. And then they dug it up 30 years later. Silly little rich people started playing with doing physics. And, they re-energized this stupid idea. And did it out of just the concept of, that's how it looks in gravity. Look, light things go higher in gravity, therefore they have more energy. It's that stupid. So it's so bad. The physics is so bad. Okay, no one there. No, there are tons of details. We cannot make the horse drink the water. So again, he keeps asserting he has all this evidence, and that somehow I'm being the asshole for not just falling into line and saying, oh yeah, it's great science, when I know it's not great science. I read the history, and the arguments are ludicrous and almost infantilely stupid. And clearly it's an overt assertion of Leibniz. Newton's physics was too atheist. That's why this exists. That's why mv squared exists. It's because Newton's physics was too atheist. Fuck. I've suggested that Gary find a local educational institution like community college to take a physics course. So 1 minute he's saying I have he's conceding the existence of my anxiety disorder, and that's causing me some sort of problems in my life, and yet he won't concede that that's the only reason why I clearly would have already done all of these things if that was possible, but it's just not as a practical matter for me. Okay. And use their lab to do experiments. Yeah, that would be great, but I'd probably get kicked out, and you know it, because the college is all about the religion, okay, and they don't care about facts. Okay, the materials will be available, and this is one of the most common types of experiments for students. So again, he keeps talking like it's a common experiment, and yet he can't produce a single demonstration. So I can show you all kinds of experiments being done. Right? I can show them dropping the weight on the train, going half the velocity. I can show it over and over and over. There's got to be at least, there's got to be 100 at least videos. More, there's probably a lot more than that. Okay, do 2-minute videos, 3 minutes, 40 seconds. A bunch of goofy little kids in their little college rooms doing the silly experiment. Done over and over and over, and here you are overtly denying the results of that experiment, which is it's clearly half the velocity. All right, so I think we have enough. So this is older comments, so we'll just say this is enough. It's got to be 2 hours of crap, right? Eek. So anyway, I didn't intend to go. Well, look, so the assertion has been made. The key contention now is that Piro's saying the same spring won't create the same momentum. So if I put a light object on the spring, I'll get 1.4 the velocity of heavier objects somehow. Somehow I can break the spring's capacity to transfer its energy. So lighter things transfer less efficiently, and heavy things transfer more efficiently somehow. Yet, the lighter thing has more kinetic energy. So it doesn't make any sense at all. And it's clearly not a fact. And like I said, I've already demonstrated in 2 different experiments here where I've shown you Professor Lewin and the air carts. I showed you the wooden blocks. Those experiments aren't indicating any evidence of this existing at all, this problem in moving light things. And it's clearly not what Physics Girl overtly says happens in her video. 100% transfer of the momentum. Yet we lost half the energy. No explanation for how you can do that. Alright, so enough. Alright, so till the next time and such. Oh, this is just so tedious. Obnoxiously so. Yuck. Yuck. Yeah. Anyway, alright, so this has been a DraftScience video presentation. Till the next time and such.